Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We spend so much time on this show talking about high-value products, software, clean energy, infrastructure. But when you look at the UK education system, you have to ask a pretty tough question.
Yeah.
Why is top-tier schooling treated like a niche luxury product? Only for the 7% whose parents can afford it.
And that is the perfect place to start. Today, we're going to try and move that conversation away from, slogans and politics.
Right.
And anchor it firmly in economic reality. If we genuinely wanted to make that high-quality education a universal public good, what is the real cost?
So that's our mission today. We've been through all the sources, and we are not dealing in hypotheticals here.
Not at all.
We're talking pounds, people, classrooms, bricks, even the boilers.
It's a cold, hard look. And I think we have to start with the number, the one that just stops most debates. Completely dead.
The big one.
The big one. To fund every child in the UK at private school standards, you would need an extra 140 to 180 billion pounds per year.
Wow. I mean, that's just a staggering figure. It almost sounds made up.
It does.
It forces you to treat this not just as, an expense line, but as a deep dive into national macroeconomics. It's the price tag for equity.
It's the price tag, absolutely. But the beauty of this analysis, when you dig into it, is that the maths, while it becomes surprisingly straightforward, it's all there.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack this enormous number. Where do we even start? The scope, I guess. How many kids are we talking about?
We have to look at the entire system. That's the only way it works if the goal is universal quality.
Right.
So we're talking about the UK's total pupil population, which is both state and private systems. So roughly 10.6 million children.
10.6 million. Okay, that's our universe. So what's the starting point? The baseline for the 93% of those kids in the state system?
Well, if you look at the 2023-24 figures for England, and then you sort of scale that up for the whole UK, total school spending right now is about 56 billion pounds a year.
Okay.
But the per pupil figure, that's the one that really hits you. Currently, the UK spends just 5,229 pounds per pupil per year.
I had to read that twice in the source material. 5,229 pounds. And the line that stuck with me, one of the sources noted that this is, and I quote, significantly cheaper than many people's annual commute.
It really puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
It makes you question what we actually value.
It immediately shows you the scale of the underinvestment. I mean, $5,000 doesn't buy you much in small class sizes or modern equipment, let alone maintaining buildings from the 60s. That's our baseline.
Right. So now for the goal.
Yeah.
What does private level funding actually mean? It's not one single number, is it?
No, it's a range. We had to synthesize the data. The Independent Schools Council, the ISC, they report average fees around £17,800. But other analyses, like one in The Guardian, push that even higher, closer to £22,100. Because they factor in all the extras, the capital spending, the high staffing ratios.
So for our analysis, to be fair, we need a robust kind of gold standard target.
Exactly. So we've settled on a working average of £20,000 per pupil per year.
20,000.
That figure covers everything. Resources, staffing levels, building maintenance, the extracurricular stuff, everything that defines that top-tier experience.
Okay, so this is the oh dear moment then. We take the 20,000 pound target and we subtract our current spend of, 5,229 pounds. That gap is 14,771 pounds. Let's just call it 14,800 pounds.
14,800 pounds extra.
For every child.
And when you multiply that gap across all 10.6 million pupils,
you land right on that headline figure, approximately 150 billion pounds extra every single year.
And we should say the full range in the analysis goes from about 136 billion on the low end to nearly 180 billion on the high end.
It does. But the core of the debate is right there. That 140 pounds to 180 billion annual commitment, that's the bill.
Precisely. And this is where the conversation has to shift from a spreadsheet calculation to political reality. We have to connect this number to the national economy, to tax.
Right. So currently, the UK's tax revenue is, about 950 billion? That puts our tax to GDP ratio at around 37%.
That's right.
Adding 150 billion in new taxes to pay for this is huge. What does that do to the national tax burden?
It pushes the UK's tax to GDP ratio up quite significantly. We'd land at approximately 43%.
43%. Now, for a lot of people listening, that's going to sound like a radical, almost impossible number.
That's the immediate reaction, yes.
Yeah.
That it would cripple the economy, change our whole identity.
Yeah.
But this is where context is absolutely everything. That 43% figure.
Yeah.
That is exactly where you find advanced economies like Denmark, Finland, Sweden.
So we have peers.
We have peers. These are countries that have, fundamentally decided that excellent public services are worth the higher tax burden. The source material notes, rather dryly, that they mysteriously manage to educate children, maintain buildings, and still function as advanced economies.
That reframes it completely. It's not an economic impossibility. It's a political choice.
It completely refutes the argument that this is somehow prohibitive. It just requires a political consensus that this investment is the priority.
Let's try to put that number on a different scale for a moment. If you just do some crude household maths, and I know this is not how tax works.
No, but it's a good illustration of the scale.
If you spread that $150 billion across the UK's 28 million households, what does that look like?
That very simplistic division comes out to about £5,300 per household every year.
And again, to be clear, that's just a scale marker. The burden would be progressive.
Of course. But it tells you the scale, the collective commitment required. It's like asking every family for a very, very significant four-figure sum each year. That's the redistribution we're talking about.
Which leads us to the accounting shuffle. Because we're not just creating money out of thin air. There's an existing private school economy.
Yeah.
What happens to it?
This is one of the most misunderstood parts of the whole debate. Right now, private schools generate about $10 billion in fee income.
Yeah.
And they account for around $16.5 billion in what's called gross value added, or GVA, to the economy.
That's the figure you always hear, that private schools boost the economy.
It is. But if we move to a high-quality, universal public model, that educational activity doesn't just vanish. The teachers, the cleaners, the textbook purchases.
The value's still there.
Exactly. The value just moves. Instead of being a private expenditure, it becomes a public expenditure. It's the same service, just paid for differently.
So GDP, the measure of national output, it doesn't really care. It just files the activity under a different column.
Precisely. The argument that getting rid of fees hurts GDP is a basic misunderstanding of national accounting. The education still happens. The real effect is pure redistribution.
How so?
Well, the families who currently pay huge private fees are suddenly much better off. That money is freed up. Meanwhile, everyone else pays more tax to fund the new, better system for all.
So it's not an economic catastrophe waiting to happen. It's a political question.
Fundamentally, yes. The sources are crystal clear on this. It's a political question about who pays and who benefits. It's about priorities.
But you can't just shift $150 billion around the economy without some friction. There has to be a short-term adjustment, a wobble, as the sources put it.
There is. And that's where economists focus. When you bring in a major tax hike to fund a major spending program, you get two forces pushing against each other. We have to talk about economic multipliers.
Okay, hold on. Multipliers. It sounds technical. What exactly are we talking about here?
It's just about the ripple effect, really. It measures how much the whole economy changes for every £1 you change in taxes or spending.
So on the tax side, taking more money out, that's a negative force.
Correct. When you raise taxes, people have less to spend, which dampens things down. That's the negative tax multiplier, which the sources estimate at around minus 0.4.
So for every new pound in tax, the economy shrinks by 40 pence.
In terms of demand, yes. But that tax pound doesn't disappear. It gets pumped straight back in through education spending. And that has a positive force.
The stronger one, I'm guessing.
Much stronger. Education spending is very labor-intensive, very local. It hits the ground running. So the spending multiplier is estimated to be between plus 1.2 and plus 2.0.
Right. So you've got minus 0.4 on one side and a plus, say, 1.5 on the other. You net those out. What's the immediate hit to the national economy?
The net short-term drag on GDP is predicted to be surprisingly small, around a minus 1% of GDP.
Minus 1%.
That's the wobble. It's a temporary dip as the system adjusts, but, and this is crucial, the sources all emphasize this is not catastrophic, it's a short-term price.
And this is where the whole story flips, isn't it? Because we've been talking about cost, but education isn't like buying fighter jets. It's an investment.
It's one of the very few areas of government spending that produces reliable, long-term economic dividends. We're moving from expense to investment in human capital.
And this is backed up by decades of research.
Absolutely. The OECD, the IMF, the work by economists like Hanushek and Vosman, The link between the quality of education and national wealth is, well, it's almost a law of economics.
So what's the headline finding from that research? The bit that really connects better schools to a bigger economy?
It's the sheer predictability of the return. The research shows again and again that even a modest improvement in a nation's cognitive skills, we're talking about an improvement of just a quarter of a standard deviation.
Okay, stop there. A quarter of a standard deviation is very academic. What does that actually look like in a classroom?
A great way to think of it is this. It's roughly the same as every child in the country, on average, getting just one extra question right on a standardized test.
One more question right. That's it.
That's it. It's a tiny, incremental, collective lift in skill.
And that small improvement across 10.6 million children translates into decades of compounding economic growth. That's incredible.
It is, because higher average schooling means higher productivity, more innovation, higher wages. It creates a workforce that's skilled and adaptive for the next 40 years.
So let's bring that back to the UK. If this $150 billion investment actually delivers that small, consistent improvement, what are we talking about in terms of an annual economic return?
That 3 to 6% long-run lift in GDP, that translates to an annual economic return of between 150 billion and 300 billion pounds per year.
And there it is. That's the revelation that changes the entire debate. The return generated by better human capital, 150 pounds of 300 billion a year, is the same as or even double the upfront investment.
The long-run return completely dwarfs the short-run dip. It stops being an expense and you see it for what it is. An investment with a staggeringly high rate of return. It literally pays for itself.
So to wrap this up, the core paradox we've uncovered is this huge, daunting upfront cost. The 140 pounds to 180 billion a year. It's a politically massive lift.
It is. But on the other side of the scale, you have this research-backed, self-funding economic engine. A reliable long-term return that promises an annual dividend of 150 pounds to 300 billion. The real question isn't whether the country can afford it.
It's whether we can afford not to.
Exactly. Can we afford to pass up that kind of guaranteed return?
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to take away. If the economics of this are so clear, if the data shows high-quality education essentially pays for itself by boosting national productivity, why is state education funding always talked about like it's a discretionary cost, like buying, lattes or fighter jets?
If the analysis says this is essential infrastructure for human capital, what deeper cultural or political force stops us from treating it with the same priority we give to roads or broadband? What does that say about our national vision?
Think about the compounding value of just that one extra question right across every single part of our society. The value of human capital underpins everything. Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.